Okay, so in the last video, we talked about kind of more of the history of how English came to be a little bit and connecting it with the other Indo-European languages and its sort of connection to the Romance languages, but also, just, again, that kind of breakdown. That also brings in the physical geography as well. And then we talked about how English has become this term here, lingua franca, okay, that helps to facilitate trade between different peoples and is just, again, a simplified way of communication, and that has led to the dominance of, or helped to expand the dominance of English as a main language. So we're going to look at, and then we kind of also brought it back to Pidgin. So what we're going to bring it to here now is kind of a topic within that as a case study is Kenya. So Kenya has two official languages, Swahili and English, and both essentially are lingua francas. Within English, they are a former British colony. So Britain, kind of, here's Kenya right there, the little purple country, right on the coast of the Indian Ocean. And so the lingua franca facilitates communication between the very different ethnic groups that reside within Kenya that would have very different languages. And so Swahili developed along the East Coast as a result, again, of an example of a Pidgin language that developed into its own language, or kind of creolized, as we'll define here in a little bit, talking about the mixture of Arabic and Bantu to help, again, facilitate trade. And so they have both of those as their main languages, and then there are other languages that are just spoken between some of the various tribes that still exist within Kenya itself. So that's kind of, again, why you'd have a multi-ethnic or multi-language state. All right. So again, here's the African languages. A lot of this, again, based on ethnicities and the ethnic groups. And so you can kind of see the very different African languages that kind of existed here. So you have your Afro-Asiatic. So again, that's more of your Arabic-related languages coming out of the Middle East. But, again, it gets spread. And then you also have your Nilo-Saharan, so your Saharan-based languages. And then you have your Niger-Congo, kind of in the red that predominantly goes over much of sub-Saharan Africa. And you can kind of see other languages, as we've said, mixed in there. There's Swahili a lot, or very often there. You see Arabic kind of gets spread a little bit. English is more over here, again, as a result of the colonial languages. And that's why you have, in many cases, countries that have several, official languages, or at least standard languages, for these connections of where were the colonies, who was in control at certain points. And so you see English, French, and Italian predominantly. And then you also see things with like Portuguese a little bit in there, and a few other locations. But for the most part, it's kind of a mixture of these two throughout Africa. And we'll refer back to Africa and this a lot more within religion, but also within ethnicity. So how did languages originally diffuse from one place to another? There's your relocation diffusion. So people move and bring the languages with them when that occurs. So English diffused through that, not only relocation diffusion, but is currently now diffused through expansion diffusion because of the internet. So because of technology, English has become that dominant language rather than just through relocation diffusion, because people in other countries are learning it. They are teaching it in schools to emphasize how important of a language English has become in order to, survive in the global economy and in the global world. All right, and that it changes over time through new spelling vocab, pronunciation. So things like the word tweets. It's not supposed to be about a bird, or the word merch when you mean to prove it. And so we're also fusing English with other languages. So not necessarily this is more of a dialect than the actual fusing of other languages. We'll talk about the fusing of other languages here. But within an English dialect, and we'll take a look at those further here, Ebonics, which is, a dialect of some African Americans predominantly in the South, which again shortens the English language to she is usually at home becomes she be at home. They have the same meaning, but again, spoken between or spoken amongst a various or a specific group throughout the United States, or so members of a specific group throughout the United States. Okay, and that was meant to be broken up into more so certain languages that have combined with English, so Franglish, Spanglish, and Danglish, combining French, Spanish, and English. All right. So with Franglis, or Franglis, combining English terms with the French language, so they combine it to make the words sound more French, because the French and the British are not very big fans of one another, and they've become very resentful of that, and so they want to make the words sound more French-like. Spanglish is really important because we have the growing numbers of Latinx and Hispanic peoples here in the United States, and so that becomes really essential to combine the terms between English and Spanish for the largest growing group here, and helps people learn English as they proceed further. Danglish combines English terms into the German language and is used more for advertising to make it a lot more predominant within Germany and make it easier for English-speaking peoples, right? So, and because the United States doesn't have that, again, the specific official language, like we mentioned back in the first video, it promotes cultural diversity within the country because we're saying, that we appreciate other languages. Now, other people have different feelings on that, if we should or should not have that official language. But I think it makes us unique in the sense that, we don't have one, right? So, English and the internet, again, connecting it to that expansion piece with the expansion diffusion, because it was at one point the almost completely dominant language on the internet because we have the most people and the most number of internet users. Now we've been kind of overtaken by China. So as internet access increases for countries around the world, English has become less dominant because now they're getting services within their own languages, or other languages are now beginning to compete with the United States. Again, i.e. Mandarin becomes really, really big. All right. So internet users by distribution by world regions. Asia, again, very heavy within both India and within China here. All right. So we look at North America. We're only 10% of the world's internet users. All right. That's pretty big. When we talk about the content versus the number of actual users, okay, here's the language piece again. So most of the world's content is, English, whether that's American, Canadian, Great Britain, people that speak English or write stuff in English, that's, majority of the content, and that is going to slowly change with the increasing numbers of, Mandarin speakers. German is probably going to be up there a little bit. Same thing with Arabic a little bit. Those numbers are going to increase, and this number is going to slowly decrease, while the number of actual users who speak English, you can kind of see Mandarin being really, really big, and then Spanish. Again, these numbers are going to increase. This number is probably going to stay relatively the same. Probably relatively the same. All right. So connecting that in with the individual languages varying, we're going to use the United States as, again, or not the United States, but English continuing as our example. So we have a definition, or two definitions here, is a dialect. So we kind of mentioned Ebonics a minute ago. So a dialect being that regional variation of a language distinguished by distinctive vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. Speakers of one dialect generally understand the speakers of another dialect because it's the same language, it's just different terminology. All right. I myself no longer drink any particular pop, but in many cases they'll say the word soda in other states. Like I stopped drinking, Sprite and Coke and Pepsi, that kind of stuff back when I was in middle school. But to determine or decide, what does that actually mean, it's going to vary. And so there's a video on, kind of in the procedure or in the slides here that talk about dialect, that talk about accents, things like that are really, really cool. That you can kind of see. So again, that idea of, duck, duck, grey duck, and the rest of the country is wrong when they say duck, duck, goose, or who says pop, who says soda. Everyone, some places they just call it Coke, even if they're asking for a Pepsi. If they're just referring to the actual soft drink. Or a soft drink, not the specific one. Again, other types of words and things like that. Like how in the United States or how in Minnesota, oh sure you betcha. Or, I was on a youth group trip to Bulgaria when I was in high school. And we had a girl from Texas, and she spoke just like the rest of us in the United States. But the only time you ever heard any type of dialect was when she said the word y'all. You could hear the drawl, the southern drawl in her voice when she said y'all. You could just hear it. So those dialects definitely vary, but we can understand each other. We understand what they are saying, for the most part. Comparing also American English to British English, again, for the most part the language is the same, but there are words and terminology that we don't understand. Again, as a result of the physical geography that separates us over the time that the languages have, become, or the dialects have become more distinct. And so connecting with that is the term here, isogloss. You can kind of see those things about the American dialects here. But an isogloss is a boundary that separates regions by the language dialect that is used. So again, over time, because of physical separation, because of the lack of technology initially, people speak very differently in different parts of the United States from other parts of the U.S. as well as, again, other parts of the globe that speak English, all right, as a result of that, all right? So this is all, those videos, so mapping how Americans talk about, certain things, how did each American look at it. I think that's really cool. The Boston versus New York, accents. Just some really fun ones here. Like Americans trying to pronounce Boston towns, Brits trying to pronounce American towns. It's really, really funny in terms of the pronunciation. But again, it kind of plays in with the whole thing of dialect. And so standard American English is what you see in most TV shows and Hollywood movies. Think about how most people speak, kind of like, an example, Matt Damon in most of his films. Another kind of example, think about Chris Evans when he's speaking in, the Avengers movies as Captain America, or Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. All right, they're speaking, or, think of the guy Josh Brolin playing Thanos. Again, they're all speaking the standard American English without really any kind of hint of an accent, or trying to not have an accent to make it the standard language that most people are going to understand. All right, with an English, and this is just a little fun thing from, if you know My Fair Lady the musical, the different English accents. And again, we have what we call the standard or received pronunciation in the UK, which is kind of like standard English, is that of people of the upper class, people who are high-bred, kind of way up here within those certain peoples. So again, the wealthiest, the most well-trained, people who went to Oxford, the wealthiest bunches of people, think about the Queen and the royal family, about how they speak, and what you're going to hear most likely on the BBC, if you ever watch BBC shows or listen to British TV shows, or stream them or listen to the BBC radio. Again, that's going to be your kind of standard English. All right, and again, you're going to get different accents again based on where you are living. All right, and so that will bring us here to the idea of a Creole or Creolized language. All right, that result is a mixing of a colonizer's language with the indigenous language of the people being dominated. So again, in a sense, this is sort of similar to a Pidgin language, but this is the actual formation of a true language itself, where you do get standard language, you do get standard sentences, formation, syntax, vocabulary. And where it comes from, the term, is French Creole that gets kind of created in Haiti, because they created this whole language within Haiti, within the French language as well, that fully combined the two. And Papiamento is a creolized version of Spanish that occurs in the Dutch Antilles, which is an island chain. So those things do happen when you combine different languages over time, where the Pidgin essentially, or the Lingua Franca essentially gets, or not the Lingua Franca, but the Pidgin language gets combined over time to become the Creole or Creolized language. So you can kind of see the examples here within this case, where French is natively spoken by a significant part of the population. So France, some of those former French colonies, the Quebec area and Montreal, areas where it's the official language. So again, a lot of the colonies or former French colonies throughout much of this part of Africa. Areas, same thing with Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, where they used to be, but it's not the official language. And then the Pidgin Creoles. All right. So again, New Orleans, Haiti, French Guiana, and then there's the Dutch Antilles in these areas. So again, it's kind of a representation, or kind of a long-standing term of the result of colonialism. All right. So that kind of covers our videos here on the background and the expansion of English, as well as kind of the importance of it and where that comes from, and then the mixing of languages and accents. So that's where we're going to stop for this video here. In the next one, you can see where we're going to pick up is going to be language diversity. All right, which we've kind of already alluded to a little bit in those previous videos, but that's where we're going to start for the next one.